Hi, I'm Don Debelak. You've reached the introductory video in the series Going Forward, Preparing to Make Sales. Now, if some of you have already gone into the Before You Big Money video or into the Creating the Introduction Plan video series, there's going to be some redundancy here. This video is really targeted more for people who've already done something with their idea and already committed considerable resources to getting it done, whereas the before you start spending big money was committed more to or targeted more at people who are just starting out with your ideas. But if you're going through all 5 video series, there is going to be a little bit of redundancy in this series because it's really made for people who haven't seen any of the videos. And at the same time, though, I think it's still worthwhile for you to go through the video series because it really lays out all the steps that you're going to have to take to get your product onto the market. So as I said, the target audience for this video series is people who've already decided they have an idea that can make money and they've already created an induction plan. They may have come into the site already with that kind of behind them and they're already ready to get really started to making money. But before I get started, sometimes inventors haven't really done a lot of market research or gotten out into the marketplace the way they should, and they sometimes are pretty cocky and they think that they have really the greatest product that's anybody's ever come up with, and it's almost can't miss. Well, I've been to invention shows where there's 700 inventors that are showing their products, and usually at least half of them think they have the best product at the show. At least half of them thinks their product is going to sell without any problems, and at least half of them think they just can't understand why people aren't ready to invest in their idea. You're much better off taking a more of a low-key idea, working and getting the research, doing things really in a professional way, and not assuming your product will sell, but actually proving that it will sell. So here are the specific steps you're going to be taking. Now again, this is going to act as a table of contents of what's coming up in the later slides. But first, when you start going to the market, you're getting people to support you, you're talking to manufacturers, anyone you're really dealing with, they're going to want to know the market research results that you have. So have your investors and have a funding plan in place. Kind of, you're not going to have the investors having given you money, but have some people who are shown some interest. Maybe you've found a couple of people who can find investors for you, but have these people lined up so that they can actually get behind you and get your product. It's the money it needs when it needs it. You're going to have a manufacturing, engineering, and design team. Maybe some of this you can do yourself, but it really helps to have a little backup with engineering and design and manufacturing so that you just don't spend your own money on that, but rather get that manufacturer involved and really enrolled in your product. You're going to want to start out in a small market, what I call a beachhead, a small place where you can actually prove your product will sell. And then as you're gathering up momentum in the marketplace from your market research and also from your beachhead small market, you want to get more and more industry support, more people who are interested in your product, more people who might be able to help you out later on. Then at this stage, you've got a successful beachhead. If you're going to start now selling into the broader market, you're really going to need more funding. And this is when you go out and get that funding, get it lined up, get the manufacturers lined up, and get prepared to go out through distribution networks. You want to choose your distribution network. Now, of course, these steps are not all sequential. So really, when you're looking at your distribution network, you're really looking at this back at the same time you're trying to find a small market strategy and gather industry support. Then once you have a distribution network, you're going to want to decide what kind of salespeople do you need with your organization. Do you need sales reps that are independent, that are out in the marketplace? Can you afford to hire your own sales reps? Or just what is the sales plan you're going to follow? And then target your first customers. Now these are the first bigger customers. So you've leaving your beachhead and now you want to find really a major company that you can really get on board with the company to keep your momentum going. And you want to target that customer, and then you want to make sure that your distribution you've got is set up to create the demand with that customer. Now, of course, one of the things when we talk about market research is you really need to have a competitive grid. This is the Drinkwell, which was the cat fountain we discussed back in the marketing information section on Before You Spend Big Money. Here again, it just shows where your product fits in with the main competitors by the major features. In this particular product, you can see that the cat well or the Drinkwell scored very well versus competitors, so it's considered a superior product. Now, when we're talking about market research, so our little competitive chart there, nobody's going to really be interested in that competitive chart is just the results of your own evaluations. They want to see that you've gotten market research from other people, market researcher from sales reps, market research from retailers, market research for people in the market. So you want to have a book. I like to have a little book. Then if people ask about it, you can say, well, here's my market research results. Now, they never look through the book, and you don't want to show anything about the book except that there's real live research in there and that you've really been serious about going out and finding out what the market wants. You want to include in your book pricing research too, and you want to talk about pricing that you have set, and you've set it based upon several research steps with end users, with distributors, and with retailers, if possible, that shows how your product is perceived in value versus the competitive products. In any quotes you have from key market players or any positive research, you want to have that all with you. You're not always going to need it, but it's always good to have so you can bring it out in case people have questions or wonder just how serious you are and how professional you are about pursuing your idea. You want to have a detailed funding plan in mind, and you want to kind of scope this out. Funding can really collapse you, and if you go out and have a successful beachhead test, but then you don't have any money to go to phase 2, where you're starting to sell to some small customers, what's going to happen is you're going to lose your momentum, you lose all of your supporters, and you're really going to have a huge setback, and restarting in the marketplace is going to be tough. Now, in presentation 7 that we did under the creating an introduction plan, there was a lot more information about financing and how to go about getting financing. But basically, these are the main categories. Generally, money from individuals, self-funding, relatives, friends. Maybe you do a crowdfunding program, but this is what you really got to rely on in order to get a beachhead or a strong market research test to show that your product will sell. Then when you're ready to move forward beyond just the very small test, then it's money from manufacturers, money from distribution, money from angel investors is going to come in there. And sometimes, again, crowdfunding is playing a bigger role. And then when you're really ready to launch into a little bit more broader market, then you can be taking a look at banks, loans. If you're really successful, a private placement, which is a sale of stocks to individuals you don't know. And then really once you're really skyrocketing up, you might look at venture financing or IPO funding. But you need a detailed funding plan really for 3 phases. Your beachhead, which is just getting a small, tiny market where you can really prove your product can sell. Your starting sales program, where you're leaving your beachhead and you're going after one rather large customer group where you can establish a little bit more solidity in your market and start generating enough revenue where you can get bank loans so that you can get going into your general sales introduction across the country. You might have to do your starting sales just in a smaller region, but you want to get funding through the next phase so that you can do a general sales introduction. Again, momentum is very important. And if you, like for instance, go to a regional market and you stay in that regional market for 3 or 4 years before you get funding for a general sales introduction, you could find that you have some competitors just stepped in and they just wiped you out in all those other markets. So really get that funding lined up so that you can be ready. So when we're talking about phase 1, which is the beachhead sales, you really like to know where you're going to get the money for all phases before, if at all possible, because you don't want to have a long delay between one phase and the other, which kind of takes away your momentum. Usually for a beachhead says it's way too early to get money from anybody but yourself, family, and friends. Sometimes you can get a little support from industry insiders that you might know. You might have angel investors, and you might have support from the manufacturers, but you can't count on that really till you've really proven your product would sell. And that's really why you want to go for a very small market where you can throw all your resources into and get a successful small scale. One of the things I like to point out to investors is or inventors is that if they have investors, you got to count about 2/3 of them are not going to come through for you. They'll change their minds. They'll have other investments. So if you think you're going to need 3 investors, make sure you try to line up at least 9, or you're going to end up with only 1. Solidify manufacturing and design. So you've come out, you're ready for a little beachhead test. Maybe you've made the products yourself, or you've made them with a very small manufacturer just to get enough product out there without spending too much money on upfront production cost or capex cost and tooling, things like that. But now, as you're succeeding through your beachhead test, you really need to make sure that you've got manufacturing and engineers lined up who are willing to work with you without you paying big money. For your designers, be sure to check your local inventors club and inventor organizations. And also, there's freelancers galore on the internet. Try to find them as far as a product designer or a product engineer or a packaging engineer, and see if you can get them to work with your product. If necessary, you can add a small hourly wage and offer to give them stock options when you eventually go public or you start selling stock. Usually if they're not that busy, they might work for that. But you don't want to be paying $125 an hour or $200 an hour and not really have any final number that you're aiming for. In other words, you want to say, okay, I have $3,000. Will you do it for $3,000? And if they take more time than that, they just still accept the $3,000. Now, when you're looking for a manufacturer, you want to find one where you can add 15% or more to their production. A manufacturer doesn't really make that much money. It probably loses money if he has 50% capacity. If he's at 80% capacity, he's going to be making money, and if he's at 90% capacity, he'll be making a lot of money. But you want to be sure that your production really makes a difference to the manufacturer. So if you're only going to add 1% to his production capacity, that's not going to be important to him. That's not going to matter to him, and he's probably not going to give you any investment. But if you can work with a manufacturer where you represent a 50% increase in his production, then all of a sudden you're taking him from some maybe not such a profitable area where he is now to being extremely profitable. That manufacturer is going to be a lot more willing to work with you on terms. He might be willing to work with you on giving you prototypes. He might be willing to do a production run at a low cost in order to prove it can sell. The other reason you want to make sure that they are really about 70% so they're not losing money and can afford to really promote your product. You want to be sure the manufacturer has funding and does not just take you on in desperation and it's going to be out of business, in a couple months. Then you're really going to be out of luck. How do you find manufacturing and prototype partners? Well, SCORE is a good start. SCORE is a group of the SBA, and there's retired executives who offer no charge mentoring services. There's almost always manufacturing people in that group, and those manufacturing people are usually quite helpful. They know the companies around. They know how to figure out what kind of a process you really need to make your product. The Thomas Register, this is a register of all the manufacturers in the country, and it lists them by what kind of manufacturing specialty they have. You can look in there and find the manufacturers who are in your type of production in your state. Local inventor clubs, that's another good resource. you'll find a lot of the people in local inventor clubs have been in years because they have workshops in their basement, they have workshops in their garages. They take on products from individual inventors to work with, and they're usually more than happy to work with an inventor. State manufacturing directories are somewhat like the Thomas Register, but they're focused on your state. They're another good sense to work with. State manufacture your local small business development center. This is another group funded by the government, the SBA. They're no charge to you. They have consultants there who have contacts both in the state and with the government agencies in the state who are looking to help new companies and looking to help inventors. Now, when we're talking about setting into distribution channels, one of the best ways for you to find out what are all the channels that are open to you and how you can find those channels and find the different people who can help you in the industry, you really want to find trade magazines and trade shows for that industry. So, for example, if you're selling into the kitchen products industry, you want to go to trade shows for kitchen stores, and you want to read trade magazines that are really geared towards kitchen stores. So webwire.com, Tech Expo, these are all about, the first three, all about trade directories, finding the trade magazines. The Gale Group is my favorite for finding a trade magazine, but you can also just walk into a store that maybe is you'd be targeting and ask what trade magazines they get. You can also just do a Google search for industry trade magazines. Typically, the trade magazines host the largest trade shows for the industry. Those trade shows, they have product directories in those trade shows, but they are really worth going to. You get a chance to see the companies. You can meet other inventors, founded companies where people have started their company with an invention and have taken out to success. Talk to those people, see exactly what type of distribution networks they worked with to get out into the marketplace. You're also at a trade show will get a directory, and usually that directory will be divided up into product categories. So you can get complementary products, or companies with complementary products that are targeted at your market, and take a look at how they've actually gone forward to get their product out in the market. Call them up, talk to salesmen, look them up in their booths if you can, and talk to them about how they went about getting to the market. And this will be a good way for you to find out ideas that have worked effectively. Now, for choosing your distribution network, if you look into our slide series called Pumping Up Sales, presentation 4 really talks about in-depth choosing a distribution network, and you might want to look at that video series also. But you want to choose a distribution network that hits the right target customer, focused as possible. Starting out, the distribution network that calls on the specialized stores or the smaller major retailers or regional retailers, that's just fine. You need the retailers, the distribution channel, to provide product support. Some distribution channels, like if you're really working with through distributors, they just stock products and ship it, and really is just a way of cutting costs for shipping. But other distribution channels have a lot of salesman support. They have integration services, which is, for instance, if you were to open a dental office, you'd call up a dental distributor, and he'd come in and he would actually lay your whole office out for you, decide what products you should take, walk you through all of your decisions, and when you're all said and done, you'd have a complete office. That's the kind of support that you really want to have if your product requires. You want everything in their distribution channel to have sales staff and sales support. You want to have people who are adding value to the customers. You want them to be well funded so that they'll carry inventory. And you want reasonable order quantities too. Like some distribution channels, especially major distributors, for example, who sell to supermarkets, well, they'll give you an order for $200,000, and that's just too much for an inventor to risk, because if the product doesn't sell, more than likely a distributor is going to send it back to you. The small market strategy. So you've kind of laid out your overall plan, how you're going to distribute the product. You've got a manufacturer, you've got engineering lined up, you've kind of got a team put in place, you have funding in place. So, but everybody's going to sit there and say, "Oh yeah, you have a nice product, but will it sell?" And that's where we go with a small market strategy. Well, I used to call it a beachhead strategy, that you can establish that somewhere your product is can sell in a small market. This could be QVC, this could be catalogs, this could be a six-store chain in Milwaukee. It doesn't matter. It's a small market, but in that small market with limited resources that you have, and for the fact that you have probably low volume production, you prove the product can go out and sell. That's what you need really to move forward to where you can get support from your manufacturers, distributors, and others to really launch your product. Internet sales can be helpful, but people are always leery. Internet sales is not a retail sale, so try to make your small market sale as into the retail where you really get the volume that they can see that you have a chance to really be a big company. How to find a small market? Well, smaller outlets, for instance, you could sell through local scrapbook stores. Really, small markets really comes from talking to other inventor-related companies at the trade shows or reading your trade magazines, or really starting to understand all the different places that your product can sell. And don't be afraid to look for alternative networks too. You might sell to clubs, like if you have a baseball related product, offer it to the baseball league and have them use it as a fundraiser. These are really ideal situations, or sell it to the baseball league and then they can sell it to the parents to raise money. Crowdfunding, I say it as a last resort, but helpful. But it is helpful, and it is not always a last resort. So basically, when you go to a reward-based crowdfunding, you put out a video, a really great video, put it on a spot like Kickstarter, and you say, "I need send me $70 when the product's ready. I'll ship you one." Well, if you can raise a significant amount of money and you can sell that product to Kickstarter participants, and you can use that money to get your company started, that's proof that there is demand for your product in the unused market. So, whereas I used to consider it more of a last resort, it's becoming more and more very viable prospect for inventors, first of all, to get funding, and second of all, to really show that their product is wanted in the marketplace and it will sell. So establishing a beachhead, this is the small market. So we've already kind of talked about it. You needed some success. And you can get it out there, but use every potential tactic you have: consignment sales, guaranteed sales, demonstrations, events, co-op advertisements, slotting allowances. I don't care what it takes. You use every tactic, get your product sold somewhere, and sold at a price that's comparable to what the product will finally be sold for. And if you can, try to go with your target distribution channel where you eventually want to sell your product. For instance, QVC sales, will raise interest, but they won't be nearly as interested to retailers as if you sold the product successfully in a small regional chain of stores. Gathering industry support. Now, what you're really all about, you have some momentum with your beachhead, you have some things going, and you want to lower your risk, and you want to line up helpers. You want to have people who can really take you forward. So that's one of the reasons we've gone to trade shows. That's where another one of the reasons that we have made contacts with different companies. We've tried to locate inventor-related companies. This is also that we can meet people in the industry that can help us. If you go back to the last section on creating an introduction plan, that video series, there is a whole video on networking and how to get those contacts, and then how to line them up so that they'll support you. when you started out with your product, you also did some networking, but that was networking more on a fine-tuned level about how to make your product, how it could be packaged, maybe how to make prototypes. It was more on a startup phase. But as we're gathering industry supporters now, remember, we're going to get ready to go after some big customers, get into the regular sales market. So we really need support of people who have sold products before or are out in the marketplace. Here's where you need to start contacting your manufacturers rep groups, getting some reps who really know the market, who can really help you. If you can get retailers to help you or distributors, marketers of complementary products, and marketers at big companies, all of these people could be an industry helper. I mean, I've worked at a company, some big companies, and I've helped little companies along. The inventor called me up every couple months. I've given him advice and told him, who she should go see and what strategies to take. People will help you, and it's going to help you avoid making a lot of mistakes. Now you're in a position where you're going to go out to obtain your funding. You should have a dynamite presentation by now because you've sold your product in your beachhead, you've got industry supporters, you've got marketing people set up, you've got manufacturing set up. So you want to get a company kind of set up and and sell stock really to just a few people because you can't have more than 10 non-credited investors. And so you want to go forward and sell stocks on a private basis in order to obtain more funding if necessary. But don't be afraid to ask for loans. People might give you loans, and don't be afraid to ask for just enough money so that you can borrow money from a bank. So guidelines for how much stock to offer. Well, value your company at 5 to 8, maybe 10 times, including family and friends, your investment. So in other words, take your investment, family, friends, and don't be afraid. Count in time, in-kind time, the time you spent developing the product. Maybe add another $50,000, $75,000, especially if it was quite a bit of work. And so maybe you have your company's stock is up to that your investment is, let's just say $30,000 with family and friends, or maybe $100,000. Offer 10% ownership of the company for an investment equal to yours. So in other words, but then say you're going to hold 40% of the shares, 10% ownership for the same investment, and then leave 50% of the stock ownership available for later on when you might need more money when you really start to get to be a large company. Now, some people are going to blanch at this because they're going to say 10%. Well, the product's really not worth $1 million. It's not based on your investment. But this is where you have to go back and talk about your beachhead success and your market success. Now, this is what you can offer. You're going to end up having to negotiate this point. Hopefully, you can get that. But it's just a good starting guideline. So present to your prospects where you have, what's your presentation, set a minimum of how much money you'll take or people will have to put up, because you can only take a select number of non-accredited investors. You just can't afford to have people giving you $500 because then what will happen is you just aren't going to be in a position to move forward because you'll be, have a ceiling of how many investors you have that are non-accredited. Locate the right salespeople. You have direct salespeople. These are the people who work for you. You might want to use your own salespeople for key accounts where could really have a large sales. You might have made contacts. So you don't want to pay 10% commission if you have a direct account, especially on a really large account. You need to have people for direct sales that are successful in the market. These are people you've met at trade shows or done other things and really make an impact. It's worth giving stock options when you start selling stocks to the right candidate for performance. So always, if you're offering options, always tie it that they have to achieve certain objectives and certain goals. You might decide to use independent sales reps. Just make sure they're already in the market. They have to have a lot of other product lines, and make sure that you're able to add 10% to their income. Most sales reps are not interested in taking on a product if it only does 2 or 3% of their income. So pick reps where you really can be a significant difference. And make sure you have the right training for the reps so that you get them out in the market in the right way. And then your final step, as we're going to be talking about here, is you've had your beachhead, you've had your success, you've gotten your money. Now you want to target your first large customers. You can have the reps going out and doing smaller customers, but really you need to target a larger customer because you have to produce sales volume that's going to keep your manufacturer happy and keep and the channel happy and keep the momentum going. So all the time that you're working with the trade shows and getting your distribution industry contents, always be thinking about who's going to be the first 1, 2, or 3 target customers that you're really going to go after. Don't make the customers too big that you can't support them with the money you have in your financing, but make sure that they're focused on your target customers. Try to have them solution-based rather than a general merchandiser. For instance, Target is really a general merchandiser, but Office Max and Office or Staples, they're more solution-based where they're trying to provide more solutions. So solution-based is better for you because then you have sales support inside the store to help sell your product. You don't have to match your final distribution channel on your first customer. You just need to land the first customer and really target on that before you start selling to smaller outlets or more additional outlets through your distribution network. Remember, in your first year, if you just break even, you're doing awfully good. So get that target customer, and some of the small specialized stores, target them with the price and volume so you break even, so that you're really ready in year 2 to really develop into a profitable company.